understanding that helps us to then be able to process through, or to be able to get to a space where then we can communicate better, when we understand that emotions are more physical first, and then to it, right?
Right.
Explain, okay, what mood do I want to be in, and how can you then affect that positively in the way that you want to. So that's kind of where I feel like it's important to kind of put those three together.
Right. So the feeling, so something will happen, and then you will have a feeling, and that feeling creates the emotion that you may be feeling that you can express, and then you get to dictate what type of mood that you're in. Is that correct?
I think that more often what we do is we try to, like, that physical sensation that we have is that baseline, right? And I think the words get mushy in there because we feel it, right? Yeah. But to be able to describe it, we say I feel, because it is a feeling, right? And so yeah, I think baseline is the physical sensation, the verbal is the feeling, and then we can then figure out, like, okay, what is it that I want to be able to have in my life as far as, like, overall, how do I want to be? Do I want to be a person who's always in a good mood or always in a bad mood? And it's never one or the other, for sure, but how do I affect that more positively by understanding this process, I guess, is kind of what does that make sense?
Yes, that's really good. So how would someone understand that process? What are the thoughts behind, let's say something triggers you and you have this sensation inside of you. Take us through what your thought process kind of looks like.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's super important to realize that we all have things that contribute to our own emotional intelligence or immaturity, right? And so where you are right now in your whatever level of emotional maturity that you have is going to be where you come from when you have these feelings, okay? And so when you have that sensation, you can either react to it, or you can take a minute to figure out what's going on with you so that you can then act on it. And the difference is that space in between the trigger or what's happening or the situation and then your reaction to it outside of you. Okay? And so because we're always going to have something going on inside, and so our limbic system, so we're going to talk a little science right now.
I love science.
I love science too. So our limbic system, so we have so our amygdala is that fight or flight, right? And so that is where we can feel that when we're triggered or something feels negative to us, we often will go into survival mode, or we're going to go into that fight or flight. And so when we feel that, that's our clue, that's our body telling us, take a step back, right? And we can train ourselves, we can create that habit of stopping in that moment and not just reacting. Because 9 times out of 10, what we're doing is we are acting in what they call an amygdala hijack, where just in fight or flight, and you're not up here in the frontal lobe of your brain, which is your thinking part. And so often what happens is that we say something we'll regret, or we hurt somebody else, or we, there's just that reaction really comes to a space of, that wasn't my best self, you
Absolutely.
know? And so when we can take a step back and get back into that frontal lobe and not be in that space of fight or flight, we handle things so much better. And so what I like to do is do a body scan, and that's a mindfulness practice where you can just stop and be like, where am I feeling this in my body? And that is like the very first thing that you can do to stop yourself from just reacting to something. And so that's where it starts, just becoming more self-aware.
Self-awareness.
And so that is the actual first step in becoming more emotionally intelligent is that self-awareness piece. Because when we're in that fight or flight, we are analyzing everything. We're going through and we're trying to make things mean something,
right,
based on all of our history, all of our past, right? Yeah. Because we all gathered experience in our lives. We've all had to protect ourselves from certain things, or we've had experiences as children where we've made them mean something, and that's a lot of where our triggers come from, and we don't always understand how or why. And so to take that time to be like, I am able to find my own space of peace. And then let's deal with this, because then I'm going to show up as my higher self, as my best self, when you really understand what's going on with you.
That is so good. And I feel like if I got anything from that, it's just being so self-aware and having that self-awareness and being able to take control of the situation rather than letting your amygdala take control, and just really taking a step back. I feel like that's super important, and we, like you said, I feel like we've all experienced this. We've been quick to react, and we've, like you said, have said things we don't mean, have done things we don't mean, and then that leaves another feeling, a feeling of guilt and shame. I feel like what you just said is super important, and I absolutely love that. So
practice, right? To be able to do that. And so doing those mindfulness practices are key, really, to being able to then, in the situation, have that space, to create that space.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So.
No, that's really important. What jump-started you to want to dive more into emotions? Were you kind of an emotional person growing up? Have you always been this calm, free-spirited, or was this something that you had to really work through and you realized okay, I worked through this, I want to help other people work through this as well? Where did that stem from?
Yeah, so I have felt like a very emotionally immature person for a lot of my life. Not really understanding or giving myself the grace to grow in emotional maturity, because I feel like some of my own personal struggles have been around perfectionism. And I feel like that has contributed to keeping me stuck in a lot of ways. And that's not the only thing, because I feel like there's also been just different relationships and things that I've chosen in my life that kept me stuck, and trying to evolve into who I want to be and achieving my goals. I knew that emotional maturity was something I really wanted to gather and gain. And so that's where it really started, is knowing that for myself. I didn't appreciate where I was per se, because so in a way my perfectionism also helped me to get to that point of understanding, because I was like, I don't like who I am right now, I don't like where I am, how I'm reacting to things. And so I feel like that's where the catalyst was, in just being so emotionally immature in my own mind, right? Whether I was or not, it was me saying, okay, this is something that I want to gain and gather. And so coming into and seeing that this was available to be an emotions mentor coach, I was like, I want to do this for me. I actually didn't even expect to coach, and I haven't done a lot of the coaching, because for me, I've been able to gather that for some of the other things I'm working on. And so it was really more of a self-improvement course that I went on, and I actually did the course twice. Wow. Because I was like, this is so important for me to be able to grow in my own emotional maturity, because my relationships are so important to me. Like my relationship with my husband, my relationship with my kids, and their significant others. And, now I have a grandchild, and who do I want to be for her? And I think that has all led to getting to a space where I wanted more for myself.
Wow, that's so good. How How long ago was that? When did you start taking the course?
So let's see, I think 2021. I did it like for the first time.
Wow.
And then so I got to the end and I was like, okay, this was really good, but I feel like there was so much more to it for me than what I was feeling through the first time. And so when it came around again, I was like, I want more. I want to dig into this deeper. And so, and I did. I got more out of it the second time because I was like, okay, I have the basics now.
Right.
Let me go a bit deeper. And so I was able to get to that deeper understanding that and I'll do it again in the fall probably because she lets me come back. She lets anybody come back for free every single time.
Oh, wow.
Which is beautiful.
That is awesome.
So, to be able to have that, and then you're communicating with other people who are learning at the same time, and you practice on each other as far as coaching goes, and I've just learned so much from this process of becoming a coach and being certified as a coach. And I can coach people and I can do that, but I also feel like the thing that I gain the most is that for myself, I've gained a lot more emotional maturity in the sense that I even know how, right? I wouldn't consider myself the most emotionally mature person on the planet. I'm still progressing, right? I'm still learning. But I love that too, because there's so much more to learn.
Right.
And so, but in all of my interactions with people, it has helped me to be more serviceable. For sure.
That's amazing. That's so very important. And I think it's really cool that she allows people to come back, because when you are taking a course or reading a book for the first time or even watching a movie, like, you're getting the basics. And then sometimes when you rewatch it or reread it or retake the course, you're getting a deeper level. And I feel like the more that, like, I've read books 2-3 times before, and I feel like each time you get something different from it. There's a couple books that are coming to my head right now that I want to reread. I'm like,
I call that a classic. Those are personal classics.
Yes.
When you have a book that you read once and you're like, gosh, I could read that 100 times and get something new out of it,
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. The first book I ever read that really, like, kick-started my evolving phase of my life was You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero. Have you ever read that one?
Yeah.
I read that about, I would say, like, maybe 4 times, because I feel like each time I learned something different from it, and it was the first book. It was really the first, like, personal development book that I ever read, and that's when I really stepped into the woman that I wanted to become. So, yeah,
that's awesome.
So, let's turn course for a little bit. Do you think that the food that we consume has a lot to do with our emotions and how we kind of process them?
Absolutely. I do believe that what we put into our bodies contributes to our mental state, because I firmly believe that our body's natural state is well, right? Being in wellness. And so when we put things into our bodies, that is what our bodies can use at a cellular level, right, to create a wellness and well-being. And so when we feed our body things that are good for it, the things that will nourish our bodies, we're also nourishing our minds, because what happens is that we create a physical state, right, where we then can be more mentally aware, and we can create a space where we can then be treating ourselves physically better. So, for example, if I'm eating sugar all the time or a lot of carbs and things like that, I feel a little bit less like doing things, right? Because there's a little bit that blood sugar spike and things like that happens. That roller coaster is going to mean that I'm going to be less mentally available, right?
Right.
When we are using food as emotional buffers, right, then we also create a space where we're not dealing with our emotions.
Right.
And so there's that as well. And so I really feel like what you eat, in the sense that that is what your body uses, and it can only use what you put in it to be able to create a healthy space or not. And so the other factors like exercise and sleep, that rest is so important. and managing stress, and all of those things contribute to our mental state. And so what we feed our bodies, whether it be the food or the mental food, like